At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
October 17th, 1998. In the early hours of the morning of Daegu, South Korea, the sun has yet to rise and the roads are quiet. The morning rush is about to begin. In that quiet, a woman stumbles alongside the side of a highway with the gait of a few too many drinks mixed with a cold shiver. Her hands shake as she pulls her clothes back into place. The tears coming down sting in the wind. Just hours prior, she was laughing under the festival lantern's light glow, food and drink in hand, and just hours prior, she had her whole future ahead of her. Now there were just headlights, flashing by as the early driver sped past. She turned towards the road and stepped forward without looking, and it happened. The screech of tires, a collision, and the start of a 15-year-long case. Welcome to Korean True Crime with me, your host, Mimi Mizuko. Thank you to my patrons for making this show possible. You can support Korean True Crime on Patreon today. Lastly, you can also join us on Discord for movie nights of films based off real crimes and the occasional drama. Link is in the description. You can also find my sources for free on Patreon. Warning, today's episode contains vague mention of sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised. Jeong Eunhee was 18 years old, born January 27, 1980, the second of 4 siblings, an older brother, a twin sister, and a younger sister. She was raised with parents who owned a small vegetable stall in Daemyeong Market, and she lived a modest life. To her father, Jeong Eunhee, she was his pride and joy. Her parents couldn't have been more proud of her when she was accepted into the nursing program at Keimyung University. Although she was living in Daegu, she dreamt of moving to Australia and traveling around the world, after she took more English courses, of course. When she came home from school, she helped around the house and tutored her little sister. On October 18, 1998, the Keimyung University campus had transformed for their annual fall festival, featuring plenty of food, drinks, and dancing. Strings of lights lit up the night and music played loudly. Eunhee came with her boyfriend, a first-year student at the police academy, to see a special event at the festival which was hosted by the Daegu Police Department. They had put on a display for the Jumakchon village, a preserved traditional Korean village that is one of the few that survived Japanese occupation. During occupation, it was taken by the Japanese government as a recreational park for officials. Going on a date to see this beautiful lit-up village must have been so lovely in the October weather. She had met her boyfriend, who we only know by his surname Park, but we can call him the pseudonym Junyoung. Junyoung and Eunhee met up with some of her classmates and grabbed some alcoholic drinks together. Eunhee was responsible and decided she wouldn't drink too much that night, despite her friends and boyfriend going really hard enjoying their time at the festival. Junyoung, however, drank a lot and became heavily intoxicated quickly. Eunhee wanted to take him home as it was close to 10:30 p.m. and the festivities were closing up. But he was having some difficulties walking as they exited the school grounds through the main gate 10 minutes later at 10:40 p.m. The next 20 minutes would be the most important 20 minutes of the entire night. Jeong Eunhee says that he recalls walking out of the main gates with Eunhee, but that he was having difficulties staying awake because he had drank far too much. The last thing he remembers is seeing the gates, and then everything went black. When he woke up, 20 minutes had passed, and he was laying on the sidewalk outside of Seongso Hospital, which is just across the street from the main gates of the university. He looked for Eunhee, confused why he would abandon her on the sidewalk alone. He tried calling her pager, but nothing. There was no response. He kept trying to get a hold of her by sending messages to her pager, which is a device that could be used to send phone numbers and short messages. After wandering around looking for her, he figured she had just left him and went home to go to bed and hopefully not wake up hungover. He didn't think too much about it, but he figured she was probably mad at him. However, Eunhee had not gone home. No one knew where she was, but everyone assumed she was safely somewhere else. Hours after Jeong Eunhee clung to her stumbling out of the university's campus at 5:10 a.m. the next morning, October 17th, 1998, 52-year-old truck driver Mr. Che continued his overnight drive. His 23-ton dump truck came down the Kuma Expressway, a 10-lane highway a few kilometers from the university. He was an attentive driver, but the sun was still low, and he hadn't seen the shadowy figure step into the road soon enough. No one would expect anything, a person or an animal, in the middle of a 10-lane expressway. The figure stepped out into the road. He hit his brakes, but the truck couldn't stop in time. His truck hit the jaywalker, sending their body flying down the road into the median. When the police arrived, they found the body of a young woman, of Jeong Eunhee, on the asphalt. The officers brought her body into the mortuary and listed her as a Jane Doe, pending identification, in a jaywalk collision causing her death. At the mortuary, they were able to identify her and notify her parents of her passing. Her parents were devastated to find her in such a horrific state. Her father, Jeong Hyun-jo, knew something was off. This didn't look like a mere traffic accident. Why would their daughter just walk out into a highway, 7.7 kilometers away from the university, in an industrial area, with 1.5-meter high medians she had to climb over to reach the middle of the road? No one wants to think someone they love could end their lives. But her family had reason to believe that she was actually very happy. They couldn't fathom that this was intentional. Mr. Jeong asked the officer at the mortuary to investigate that this was not a traffic accident, but they told them this was just a traffic accident, and they had already started the paperwork to close the case. He was in shock, but he knew he was not going to stop until he knew what truly happened to his daughter. He asked to see her body, which they pushed back at, telling him with the condition she was in, it wasn't right for a parent to witness that. He insisted, so they agreed and covered her head, which was in a poor condition following the collision. Mr. Jeong noted that his daughter was not wearing underwear, yet her pants were on. The mortuary worker lifted up a piece of fabric that was actually the inside lining of her jean pockets and stated, This is the remnants of her underwear. Mr. Jeong said, no, that's not her underwear, and he raised suspicions of what had actually happened to her. A few hours later, Jeong Eunhee arrived at the mortuary after receiving a call from Eunhee's parents. Despite half a day passing, Jeong Eunhee arrived intoxicated, meaning he had already started drinking again. Mr. Jeong tried to ask him about the incident, but he saw her and then quickly left, trying to avoid talking to the parents. The police went to speak to the truck driver, Mr. Che, in the meantime, who stated that he had seen something move out into the road suddenly, but was unable to stop. He believed that Eunhee was jaywalking. The police accepted this statement and didn't charge Mr. Che with anything because if Eunhee had walked into the road, it wouldn't be his fault. Mr. Jeong, the next day, October 18th, contacted Eunhee's friends and members of a university club she was a part of to help search for evidence regarding his daughter's whereabouts for the 6 hours between leaving the festival and being hit by a truck on the expressway. Some of her friends decided to help the father search the sides of the expressway for anything that showed where she came from to get on to the highway. Had she just walked up the road from an on-ramp or walked through the grass from a ditch and climbed over the guardrails? One of the friends who helped search was interviewed later and stated that she thought there might be some evidence alongside the road. So she started carefully walking down the side of the highway. and it was there that she found a pair of white underwear stuck to the guardrail as if tossed out by a passing vehicle. Mr. Jeong called the police again and handed over the evidence, frantically telling them that this was not an accident. Something had happened. He told the police he had noticed that his daughter was missing her underwear and her bra at the morgue. The police pushed back that the morgue worker said that Eunhee was wearing underwear and that it had just been badly damaged in the collision. Eunhee's twin sister saw the pictures of the underwear that was collected and told the police, "These are definitely my sister's." The police, however, stated that the underwear that were collected were, and I quote, "granny panties that only an old woman would wear and couldn't be Eunhee's because they were so sun-bleached." So they packed the underwear away into evidence. They did not take any photographs at the crime scene. No swabs for DNA, nothing. Even after Eunhee's twin sister told them and showed them that she owned the exact same pair because they got them as a gift last holiday, they still didn't believe her. The officer dismissed the idea that this could have involved any foul play, citing that her body was found without signs of sexual assault, with her underwear on, and the driver had seen her willingly walk into the road. That is, when Mr. Che wasn't telling reporters that he might have seen someone push her, but he couldn't be sure. His testimony would never be questioned by the police further, but in interviews he would constantly say he was not sure what he saw. Everything happened so fast for him because he was speeding down the expressway that he really truly couldn't be sure what he saw. The family suspected Mr. Che at first because he had a few arrests on his record, although we don't know what for. The next day, October 19th, 2 days after the incident, Mr. Jeong calls and asks Jeong Eunhee to meet with him. He knows that Jeong Eunhee was likely the last person to see her alive, and he's crucial to finding out what had happened to her. But for some reason, Jeong Eunhee was avoiding the Jeong family until Mr. Jeong got so angry that he screamed at him over the phone. He scolded him by saying, "How can you be doing this?" Jeong Eunhee finally agreed to meet with Eunhee's father, but told him he couldn't remember anything after passing out on the sidewalk and waking up alone in front of Sangso Hospital. Jeong Eunhee had also been heavily drinking since that night, believed to be from guilt, but he continued to distance himself from the private investigation being conducted by Mr. Jeong and always insisted that he had no reason to meet with him. He upheld that he believed it must have just been an accident, and he blamed himself for being so intoxicated he couldn't take care of her. I'll suggest that although Jeong Eunhee's blackout was convenient and no one can corroborate his story, he likely couldn't get involved in the investigation because he was a first-year student at the police academy. If he went against the police in any way, he likely would have hell to pay for it, or it would end his career in policing. Maybe he did know something and kept it to himself to save his own career, which I'm not defending, just suggesting that this might have happened. As the family asked for people to join in the search for evidence relating to what happened, they did contact Jeong Eunhee's police academy to ask for help because they had put on the festival, but they refused to assist them. Mr. Jeong never chose to give up, though. He continued to send requests to the police to analyze the underwear that was found for evidence. The officers assigned to the case finally told him, "Show me evidence that this isn't a traffic accident and we will." I wish I could tell the officer that that's your job, not the grieving father's. The police never had any intention of investigating this case. On top of all of this, the family was not dumb. The crime scene that they had visited not even 12 hours after the incident had such little blood, it didn't seem possible for her to have been hit by a truck. Eunhee was also wearing all of her clothes, which were torn from the accident, but how had her underwear gotten onto the guardrail and her bra missing? While she stumbled into the road, why would she have taken them off and discarded them? Regardless of all of the mounting evidence, the police officially closed the case after a month. They concluded the case even before the autopsy report was completed. They hadn't investigated Jeong Eunhee or Mr. Che. They hadn't even questioned other drivers who might have seen something. I bring this up because the autopsy report revealed something that brings Mr. Che's testimony into question. Back at the morgue, 2 months after the incident, the autopsy report was out, yet the parents would be denied access to the report. Mr. Jeong spoke to the police who said to him, "You're just a vegetable vendor, so what do you know? Do you know how to read an autopsy report?" We told you it's a traffic accident. So, it's a traffic accident. You think we'll do anything you ask just because you request it." Mr. Jeong told this to an interviewer years later. The police treated him so poorly, even though he just lost his daughter. Even if Mr. Jeong was making nothing out of a traffic accident, the police should deal with grieving families much better than this. They could make the time for him. That autopsy report that they refused to let the family see at this time revealed that there was no bleeding due to her being hit by the truck and the car. The report concluded that Eunhee was likely dead before the truck even hit her, and most of the bruising on her body was done prior to her death and not caused by the car accident. The autopsy does not state that any semen was detected on her body. The autopsy did not state whether or not a rape test had been done. It did, however, say that the damage to the body was not consistent with a pedestrian traffic accident. At the time of her death, her blood alcohol content was 0.13, which is high considering that she hadn't drank anything in the last 6 hours, meaning her time of death might have been closer to when she left the festival. Professor Kwok, who was in charge of the autopsy, would later say that the autopsy results were incomplete and also inaccurate. As well, the police had come to him and told him to withhold the report from the family so that they could close the case. It's so frustrating to say in so many cases that the police just did not want to do their jobs, and that this is why the case was held back. The killer went free or the case went cold. The family was not going to accept this, however, and they created an investigative memorial website dedicated to finding information about what happened to Eunhee, as well as inform people around the world about the ongoings of the case. Their belief was clear. Eunhee had been attacked and killed. Someone had disposed of her body on the highway to frame it as a traffic accident. The website collected news reports about Eunhee and posted them on the site, which is still active, and I will include it in today's episode's sources. No images of Eunhee exist online for her privacy, but the family did upload photos that they took of her underwear that was found on the side of the road. They were smart not to move the underwear from the crime scene, even if the police didn't believe that it was Eunhee's. Keimyang University Student Council president had come forward that year in support of the family's website and stated, if a female college student was found dead on a highway at dawn, with her underwear missing, it's common sense that this is not a simple traffic accident. In March 1999, Mr. Jeong was repeatedly filing complaints to have the underwear tested. And finally, after 5 months passed, the police finally sent the underwear to get tested to forensics. The results were devastating, to say the least. Semen was detected in her underwear, but because the police had waited so long, with the technology they had at the time, no DNA could be collected from it. The family had received affirmation that they were right to fight so hard against the police's laziness, only to be met with another obstacle. Still, the police did not investigate or reopen the case, but the family was keeping the case open. Months passed with no progress made. The family continued to reach out to news stations to get anyone to care about what happened to their daughter. Over a year later, by December 1999, the police were able to finally close the case for good. No new evidence would be submitted. Despite the semen being found, they stated that it wasn't relevant to her death. Mr. Jeong's life following this became dedicated to finding answers and petitioning every authority he could reach. He closed his vegetable stall, and with his wife, adult children, they dedicated their livelihoods to justice and finding answers. They were petitioning the Blue House, the National Police Agency, the prosecutor's offices, anywhere who would listen to them. In 2005, finally, there was some movement in their investigation. The National Forensic Service agreed to reanalyze the semen found in the underwear, which previously couldn't be DNA tested. Advancements had been made in forensic science in the last few years, and to everyone's surprise, they were able to obtain a DNA sample. DNA samples were collected for Mr. Che, the truck driver, and Park Jun-young, the boyfriend. The sample matched neither of them. However, the sample was contaminated due to improper handling of evidence, and the sample had greatly degraded. But they did prove one thing. The underwear were indeed Eunhee's. Her DNA was found on the underwear. This indicated that sexual assault likely did happen prior to her death. But without a rape kit being done during her autopsy, it's unknown whether or not she was assaulted or raped. As private investigators looked into the case, they were told that all of the autopsy photos and crime scene photos had been lost due to poor data management at the police station. They'd just been deleted on accident, is what they said. It became difficult for private detectives working for the news agencies to try to reopen the case for the family, like NBC's private detective Notebook, who was looking into the case. After 5 more years had passed in 2010, South Korea had introduced new legal reforms extending the statute of limitations for sex crimes that included DNA evidence. For Eunhee's case, however, this came too late. The 10-year extended statute of limitations meant that it had expired in 2008, 2 years prior. The only option the family had left was to try to pursue a special robbery and rape charge, which required that Eunhee had been robbed alongside the sexual assault, which had a 15-year limit. The Jeong family was becoming desperate for leads in the case. Unfortunately, the case hit the 15-year mark. But in 2010, the statute of limitations for sex crimes that included DNA evidence was extended to 25 years, meaning the family had hope for the investigation to start again. But because the original statute of limitations had passed, they were not granted an extension and did have to stay within the 15-year statute of limitations for robbery. That year, in 2013, Mr. Jeong received a phone call from the prosecutor's office. In a moment that was devastating and affirming, they said they found a match for the DNA found in the semen on Eunhee's underwear. The DNA matched a foreign factory worker from Sri Lanka, a 48-year-old man, 33 years old at the time of the assault, who we can refer to by the pseudonym Kasan, since he is only known as Mr. K. Kasan's DNA was able to be matched to the semen found in Eunhee's underwear after he was arrested for his second time in Korea and sentenced to prison time for sexual assault. The first arrest was made for soliciting sex from a minor. Following his arrest, his coworkers had told reporters that there were rumors that he had sexually assaulted other women. Likely, he was bragging about it at work. On September 4th, 2013, the Daegu District Prosecutor's Office arrested Kasan on charges of aggravated robbery, rape, and kidnapping. After his arrest, the prosecutor's office announced that Kasan had 2 accomplices in his crime, although both of the men had already left the country, one in 2001 and the second in 2005. Without their DNA evidence, they could not initiate an extradition request for these 2 men. Sri Lanka and Korea do not have an extradition treaty, so this would be near impossible. By mid-2014, the Daegu District Court delivered its final verdict. Kasan was not guilty. The reason why? The DNA evidence relating to Eunhee's sexual assault was unrelated to the charge of robbery, which was their only hope of convicting Kasan. The sexual assault statute of limitations had passed in 2008. For the special robbery and rape charge to hold, the prosecution needed to prove that robbery and rape occurred together. The court ruled that there wasn't any evidence that a robbery took place, so there wasn't enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kasan had robbed her. Kasan was, however, convicted in a separate trial for driving without a license and sexual harassment of a worker at a bar. He received a suspended sentence of 1 year and 6 months for this crime, with a 3-year probation. The suspended sentence meant that he served no prison time if he completed his 3-year probation without any issues. This was not the justice Eunhee and her family deserved. The prosecution tried to bring Kasan back to trial in 2015 in an appeal. They brought in a new witness, a Sri Lankan worker named Mr. H, who worked alongside Kasan in 1998. He claimed to have been told about the crime committed that night by one of the accomplices as he returned back to the factory that very morning. Over a 15-minute break, the accomplice told 10 men the graphic details of their assault on Eunhee. The story was, without discussing graphic details, Kasan and the other 2 men had seen Eunhee walking home intoxicated. They approached her and attacked her, dragging her under a bridge into a remote field. They stole her money, ID, and abandoned her. The prosecutors believed that Eunhee was terrified and went out to the expressway to cross the road quickly, but in doing so was accidentally hit by the passing truck. But there was a lot of doubt that this is what happened to Eunhee from her family. They didn't believe that in a state of panic, intoxicated or not, she would run across a highway to find help. It only made sense to them that she must have been pushed. It isn't known for how long the assault lasted or for how long the men held her captive, but this happened within that 6-hour period after she left the festival. Kasan and the other 2 accomplices returned to work, which was nearby the Sungso Industrial Complex, where the accomplice began to brag to his coworkers. In fact, the Sungso factory workers were not shocked by this story because there had been almost a competition between some of the men to share stories of them raping Korean women. This unfortunately led to a lot of xenophobic media about Sri Lankan factory workers. I also can't imagine how Kasan's wife felt when she heard this history of targeting Korean women and girls to sexually assault them, because he had married a Korean woman in order to get permanent residency, but he still didn't have his citizenship at the time of his arrest. The defense argued that due to the passage of time, Mr. H, the coworker who had heard the story, couldn't possibly remember what was said to him and who said it. His testimony could not be considered to prove Kasan's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and the court upheld the not guilty verdict. I can understand why this didn't work, because so much time had passed and eyewitnesses are usually unreliable, and Mr. H could have been encouraged to include the robbery bit as a way to prove the robbery charge, which was their only hope in getting Kasan charged with special robbery and rape. It should be noted that Mr. Jeong had told the police that her student ID and some of the books she checked out of the library that were in her backpack were missing when they did find her belongings. But they couldn't be sure that Kasan was the one who stole these things. But Mr. Jeong wouldn't stop trying. 2 years later, in 2017, the case was sent up to the Supreme Court on July 18, 2017. However, yet again, the court determined Kasan was not guilty, this time acquitting him of all charges. The prosecution was called out for beginning the process to deport Kasan to Sri Lanka, where their statute of limitations for rape was 20 years. They had gathered the data for the DNA sample of the semen found in the underwear, as well as all of the evidence relating to the case, and had plans to send it to the Sri Lankan government, hoping he would be punished there. Kasan was deported from South Korea to Sri Lanka, where he was indicted for sexual assault based on this information. I should clarify, by law, sexual assault and rape are 2 different crimes. Rape does carry a heftier crime, but they couldn't prove that this happened because a rape kit had not been done during the autopsy. Therefore, Kasan could only be investigated for sexual assault. Unfortunately, as unsatisfying as it is, I can't find any public records or reports from the Sri Lankan government regarding whether or not Kasan was found guilty or not. Surprisingly, when interviewed following this decision, Mr. Jeong told CBS that he never claimed the Sri Lankan men were the culprits. Rather, he wanted the police to continue investigating and doing their jobs. He, to this day, couldn't say what happened to Eunhee, but he doesn't know if Kasan is the one who did it or not. In 2021, Mr. Jeong and his family were awarded 55 million won total as an apology after the court ruled that the police did not thoroughly investigate Eunhee's death. They failed to conduct an on-site investigation and delayed the examination of evidence, which led to the case being unsolvable. Unfortunately, we don't know what happened with Kasan and the other 2 alleged culprits in this case, whether or not they killed Eunhee, if she took her own life, or if she was just trying to run away. Kasan's history of crimes and DNA found on the underwear leaves us to believe that the prosecution did find the culprit, even when the police wouldn't try, but it was too late. This lack of closure is very difficult, especially for Eunhee's still grieving family. You never truly are able to forget someone lost. There is no resolution in this case, and that's difficult for many of my listeners, as I've been told. Not every story has a conclusion or has answers, but their story still matters. This isn't the end to stories like Eunhee's, though. Supporting efforts like End the Backlog, which is a program that seeks to enact laws and policies for comprehensive rape kit reform, They hope to end untested rape kit backlogs. Eunhee's story couldn't have been prevented by this, but justice might have been served if it had. Her evidence would have been processed as soon as it arrived, leading to the arrest of the culprit. Survivors of sexual assault deserve more from the government and police that swear to protect them. And most importantly, continue to believe and support victims of crimes. As always, thank you for listening. Join us on Discord for free movie nights. Find my sources on Patreon for free. There's a quarterly sticker club on Patreon. Follow the show wherever you listen. Thank you to my patrons, Vix Mac, Lala, William White, G1 Edwards, Nico, Elijah Hancock, Anomanom, Dr. Bob, Lumos, Emma Brown, David DeFoya, Adriana, Pip, Dade512, Lisa, Caitlin, Sharon Evans, Nicey, Breaker O'Day, Kitten Who, Asta Bach, Quilt00, Kristen, Thy Lady Rach, and Amber. Dahome topayo. See you next time.